I'm Surina Ainsworth, working Perinatal as a mental health nurse. I joined as a student in September 2020 and I joined the nursing bank in March 2021. I was joined as a student, as I say, in September 2020. I went to Blackheath Lane, so Staffordshire University. I had a good experience at university. I enjoyed it, although it was challenging at times. And when I was working as a healthcare, that was beneficial because it gave me experience for what I'd eventually be doing when I qualified. So I found out I was neurodiverse in March of 2021. I was a student at the time at Ashcombe on placement, and I'd failed my first assignment at university, which I was really gutted about, and I couldn't understand why. I was put forward for assessment for dyslexia at first, because that's what I thought it was. It come back saying no, definitely not dyslexic, and then they were asking me sort of further in-depth questions to try and probe about what it could be. And I discovered that I got ADHD, and I was recommended to be assessed for autism at that point as well. After I was diagnosed, I was in touch with the Combined Ability Network, which I was recommended to contact, and Angela Peake allocated me a buddy. So that was really beneficial for me. So I had a buddy for me whole time as a student, and I could have continued that as a qualified as well, which was great. So while I was on the bank in 2021, I'd already had my diagnosis of ADHD, and my diagnosis followed of autism. When I got my diagnosis, it was a relief because I'd been questioning sort of what was wrong with me, and I'd had these struggles with anxiety, depression, all sorts of things that had been ongoing for years. I'd had agoraphobia at some point, but it was quite validating to think actually it wasn't that at all. It was something completely different really. So I did feel it was useful to have a reasoning behind how I felt. As part of the student process, we're given 3 choices in order of preference. So first choice being number 1, of areas we'd like to work when we qualify. So we list the 3 choices, and then as part of the interview, them choices are taken on board, and then we're told at a later date where we're being allocated to. I found the interview process challenging, to be honest. Although the panel were lovely, it was quite intense to have a panel of 4 or 5 people and just me on the other side of the table. It felt a bit like I was on The Apprentice. So yeah, it was very intense. There was 12 questions, which, having had an interview experience with another trust as a backup plan, I'd had the questions in advance. There was only 5. Whereas in this trust I wasn't given the questions in advance. There was 12, and at the other trust there was only 2 on the panel and there was 4 on my panel. So it was quite intense, to be honest, and that was one of the most difficult parts of my process. Because I'd been a student already with the trust for nearly 3 years at that point, I did expect it not to be as intense, and thought I'd have had a bit more support around sort of with the questions, because the trust knew me, they knew about my diagnosis. So yeah, that would have been nice. The current support's really good within the trust. I'm part of the Combined Ability Network, and there's also the DABS buddy scheme as well, which I've utilised. The only sort of negative I would point out is it's been personally challenging for me to try and find someone who's responsible for the access to work, and I've had to flip back and forwards to Angela Peake, and she hasn't had any clarity of who's responsible for those things. So I think going forward that would be great if there was somebody named or somebody we could be directed to get answers and clarity around that. So what's next for me is, at the minute, I'm happy in my role that I'm in now, and I'm hopeful to stay in this for some time, with some progression at a later date. I am hoping to join the steering group for recruitment, which I've been asked by Amy. So that will hopefully help to shape things for the future for people with neurodiversity and other disabilities going forward, because working in mental health, we should be able to do these things quite easily.